And what we're seeing happening at a national level on a myriad of different areas is really disturbing. It is disturbing because of the lack of care and concern that the federal administration is showing for people who have literally put their lives on for this country. And it is disturbing because of the impacts it is going to have on the services that are being provided to veterans and the jobs that veterans are filling all across my state and all across this country. And when we talk about these cuts, we're talking about cuts to things like healthcare, housing, education, workforce development, all the things that are vitally important to making sure that veterans get the benefit of the bargain that they made with the United States when they decided to serve. And it is really offensive to me to see the recklessness by which we've seen President Trump and Elon Musk operate, because it is doing real damage. And every time I see the president talk about, or other people in office talk about how there's not going to be impact to services when we make these cuts, I really think it's just absurd, because we all know that when you cut 2,400 jobs of veterans, when you cut jobs all across the federal service, that those people are doing real important work on behalf of the public, and services already being impacted. Just in the last few days alone here in Washington, we've started to hear about the services that will no longer be available or will be substantially delayed because of the cuts that we're seeing in Washington. And if you spread that impact all across this country in blue states and red states, we're going to see veterans whose lives are upended because of these cuts. And we need to do everything that we can to try to fight back about that. And let me just say, as an attorney general, I'm so excited to be joined by other attorney generals in this country who are looking very closely at every executive order that comes out from the White House to see what action we can take to protect veterans and to protect the rest of the public from these disastrous cuts. And we've started to do that work both in our litigative work and in our advocacy. There are attorney generals, including myself on behalf of the state of Washington, who have fought in court to stop some of these cuts from happening. With the OMB funding cuts that were proposed a couple of weeks ago, successfully moved for a temporary restraining order and preliminary injunction to stop those cuts from doing damage. We intervened, moved in a case with the cuts of the National Institute of Health that provides life-saving research and services to people all across the state, and successfully convinced the judge to stop those cuts from being implemented. But even though we're seeing judges tell the administration to stop these cuts, we're still hearing about problems. And many of the cuts, including those cuts to the Veterans Administration, have come after those court orders. So we're looking really closely to see if there's additional legal action that we can take. But it's also really important that we find ways to fight back across the spectrum. And as Senator Duckworth and others have said, I encourage you and really implore all of you to make your voices heard to your representatives in your states and in your districts. They need to feel the pressure and understand the stories that can be told and the lives that are being impacted by these cuts, because that pressure can help make a difference and it can help force the conversation in a new direction. Because I know that pressure can change lives and get things back to the status quo and make sure that veterans have the services and the jobs that they are entitled to as people who have sacrificed this country. And in Washington, there's so many veterans who are worried now, even if they haven't been immediately impacted. And we are being responsive as an office and as an agency to advocate for them, because my office does so much on behalf of veterans, irrespective of what's happening in Washington, D.C. We advocate for veterans protections and consumer rights protections, civil rights cases, and many others. And I want to make sure that we can continue to do that work for them as we move forward. And we need to have a partnership with the federal government to really be truly effective. And it's very clear that we're just not going to see that from President Trump, despite all of his bombastic statements about being a supporter of veterans. We just know that that's a lie, like so many other things that this president has said.